What if I told you that, in a matter of hours, a single military operation dismantled a nation's nuclear ambitions, paralyzed its infrastructure, and left its capital in disarray? This wasn't just a textbook airstrike. B-2 bombers and Tomahawk missiles led a coordinated assault that combined advanced technology with precise timing. But the operation didn't stop in the skies. Imagine the shock as state TV broadcasts were suddenly hijacked, sending a message no one in Iran expected. Stay here to uncover how, through a blend of stealth, firepower, and psychological warfare, an entire regime was blindsided. It all began with the largest deployment of B-2 bombers since 2003. 6 bombers lifted off from Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, each loaded with a mission that would test the limits of modern warfare. The selection of Guam was deliberate. Its air defenses and specialized hangars were built for the demands of the B-2, ensuring the aircraft remained secure and operationally ready until the last possible moment. These bombers, engineered for high-altitude flight and radar evasion, were uniquely positioned to strike targets that most other aircraft could never reach. The B-2 Spirit is not just another bomber. Its shape and materials make it nearly invisible to radar, allowing it to slip through advanced detection networks with little warning. For this operation, every detail was calibrated for success. Soon after takeoff, the bombers executed mid-air refueling, an essential maneuver that allowed them to carry maximum payloads and reach distant targets without landing. This logistical step underscored the urgency and complexity of the mission, requiring precise coordination and absolute secrecy. Each B-2 carried the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, a weapon designed for a singular purpose: to destroy the most fortified targets on Earth. Weighing nearly 30,000 pounds, the GBU-57 can penetrate up to 300 feet of reinforced concrete, a capability unmatched by any other conventional weapon. This was not just a show of force, it was a calculated choice to neutralize Iran's deeply buried nuclear facilities, where standard munitions would have failed. The bomber's role was clear: deliver these bunker busters with absolute precision. Timing and coordination were critical. As the bombers closed in on their targets, 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles launched simultaneously from US submarines. These subsonic missiles, capable of low-altitude flight and pinpoint accuracy, raced toward key sites at Natanz and Isfahan. Their primary objective was to suppress Iranian air defenses and disrupt critical infrastructure, clearing the way for the bombers to strike without interference. The entire operation depended on split-second synchronization. Any delay could have exposed the bombers or allowed Iranian forces to mount a defense. Iran's radar network, among the most advanced in the region, was rendered ineffective. The B-2s moved through detection zones as if they were not there, their presence unknown until their ordnance was already on the way. Once over Iranian airspace, the bombers shifted from evasion to attack. GBU-57s dropped from high altitude, targeting fortified nuclear sites designed to withstand all but the most specialized weapons. The destructive power of these bombs was evident in moments. Layers of concrete and steel were breached, and the core of Iran's nuclear infrastructure was left in ruins. Natanz and Isfahan were the primary targets. Natanz, responsible for enriching uranium, was buried under hundreds of feet of earth and protective material. The GBU-57s penetrated these defenses, destroying equipment essential for Iran's nuclear ambitions. At the same time, Tomahawk missiles struck Isfahan, a facility crucial for uranium conversion. The precision of these attacks ensured that both sites were disabled before Iranian forces could react. The response from Iranian air defenses was frantic but ineffective. Surface-to-air missiles launched blindly, targeting threats they could not see. By the time radar operators registered the scale of the assault, much of the infrastructure was already destroyed. The shock extended beyond physical damage. It was a demonstration that even the most secure sites could be reached and neutralized with little warning. This operation was more than a military strike. It was a message. The combination of stealth, firepower, and coordination left Iran's nuclear program in disarray and sent a clear signal to observers worldwide. The immediate aftermath was defined not only by the destruction on the ground, but by the realization that the most advanced security measures had failed in the face of coordinated American power. As the bombers made their return to Guam, attention shifted rapidly from the battlefield to the halls of power. The significance of the operation was about to be reframed, not just as a tactical success, but as a political statement crafted for a global audience. Within hours of the initial strikes, the White House released a tightly composed Situation Room photo. President Trump sat at the head of the table, flanked by Vice President J.D. Vance and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Their expressions were unwavering, the room focused and orderly. The operation's secrecy and planning was now replaced by full transparency and success, a deliberate move to project US resolve and control at a critical moment. President Trump wasted no time. In a televised address, he declared the operation a spectacular military success, confirming the destruction of Iran's nuclear facilities at Natanz and Isfahan. But what came next would push Iran's regime to its breaking point. The timing of the announcement was as calculated as the strike itself. By taking to the airwaves just hours after the attacks, the administration seized the narrative before Tehran could respond. The message was clear. The United States had acted on its terms, leaving little space for speculation or distortion from Iranian state media. Every detail of the announcement reinforced the image of a nation in command, with military precision matched by political discipline. The Situation Room image was more than a snapshot. It was a message crafted for maximum impact. For America's allies, it offered reassurance. The United States was capable of decisive action, with its leadership unified and steady in the face of crisis. For adversaries, the image served as a warning that even hardened, deeply buried nuclear targets could be eliminated in hours. The presence of Vance and Hegseth underscored the operation's broad, political and military backing, signaling that this was not a rogue decision, but the product of alignment at the highest levels of government. The visual narrative left no doubt about the chain of command or the seriousness with which the mission had been executed. The administration's approach relied on speed and clarity. Hours after the last bomb hit its target, the world saw the faces of those responsible for the decision. The White House released not only statements, but also visuals of composed leadership at work, a calculated signal to audiences both foreign and domestic. This combination of rapid communication and orchestrated imagery was designed to prevent the emergence of alternate narratives and to keep momentum firmly in American hands. The psychological effect was immediate. Uncertainty and speculation were replaced with a sense of inevitability about the operation's outcome. For Iran's leadership, the swift American messaging left little time to regroup or craft a response. The regime found itself on the defensive, unable to shape the narrative as news of the strikes and their aftermath spread. The White House's framing of the attack as a complete and unambiguous victory left no room for Tehran to claim resilience or to downplay the scale of the damage. The message was not only aimed at Iran, but also at the wider region, where rival states and non-state actors were watching closely for signs of American resolve. Domestically, the announcement played into a broader strategy. The phrase "spectacular military success" resonated with a domestic audience that valued strong leadership and decisive action. The carefully chosen language and images served to reinforce support at home, while signaling to the international community that internal political divisions would not affect America's willingness or ability to act. The White House also left room for future maneuvering. While the declaration of success was unequivocal, it was paired with language that suggested ongoing vigilance and readiness. The administration's messaging balanced celebration with caution, making it clear that this operation was one phase in a broader campaign. The door remained open for further escalation or negotiation, depending on how events unfolded. As the world absorbed the initial shock of the strikes, attention began to shift. The immediate aftermath was defined by disrupted communications, uncertainty, and a scramble for information. Yet even as the dust settled over Natanz and Isfahan, Another front was opening, one that would test Iran's defences in ways far beyond airstrikes. The next phase would see Iran's adversaries employing new tactics, targeting not just physical infrastructure, but the very systems that kept the country functioning. No sooner had US bombers exited Iranian airspace than Israel's own blitz unfolded under the codename Operation Rising Lion. This was not a single strike or a narrow objective. It was a synchronized, multi-dimensional offensive designed to dismantle Iran's military and destabilize the regime's grip on power. The operation combined precision airstrikes, cyber warfare, and psychological tactics to maximize disruption and sow confusion at every level of Iranian society. Israeli fighter jets launched a focused campaign against Iran's military backbone. Missile factories and drone command centers were hit in rapid succession, each strike calculated to degrade Iran's ability to retaliate or project force beyond its borders. Radar installations, essential for air defense and early warning, were targeted to leave Iranian skies exposed. These attacks did not aim for symbolic damage. They were intended to systematically dismantle Iran's capacity to detect, coordinate, and respond to further threats. The loss of missile and drone production sites, paired with the blinding of radar networks, left Iran's military strategy in disarray. While the air campaign unfolded, Israeli cyber units executed a parallel assault on Iran's critical infrastructure. Power grids failed in major cities, plunging neighborhoods into darkness. Banks and ATMs went offline, halting financial transactions and leaving citizens unable to access cash. Internet service collapsed across key regions, severing communication lines and isolating communities. These cyber attacks were not about temporary inconvenience. They were intended to paralyze the government's ability to command, control, and communicate. The disruption extended far beyond military targets, reaching into the daily routines of millions and amplifying the sense of instability. Operation Rising Lion also deployed psychological warfare with precision. At the height of the assault, Iranian state TV went dark and protest footage screamed across every screen, undermining Tehran's narrative instantly. Footage of angry crowds and anti-regime slogans interrupted regular programming, accompanied by the phrase "Rising Lion" in bold. Iran's leadership had long relied on state media to project strength and control. Now, that same platform was used to broadcast dissent and erode public trust. The psychological impact was immediate, planting seeds of doubt and fear within a population already shaken by physical and digital attacks. The operation's most critical target was the IR-40 heavy water reactor in Arak. Despite official claims that the facility had been dormant since 2015, satellite imagery and intelligence suggested ongoing activity. The reactor represented a unique threat. It allowed Iran to produce weapons-grade plutonium outside the usual uranium enrichment cycle, providing a faster route to a nuclear weapon. Israeli jets pressed deep into Iranian airspace to reach Arak, facing the risk of dense air defenses and the technical challenge of striking a heavily fortified site. The attack destroyed the reactor's protective dome. Satellite images captured steam rising from the core just before the strike, confirming the reactor was operational. The destruction of the IR-40 dealt a decisive blow to Iran's nuclear ambitions, eliminating its ability to produce plutonium for years. For the Israeli pilots, the mission carried significant risk. One misstep could have meant failure or capture deep inside hostile territory. On the ground, the combined effects of airstrikes, cyber attacks, and psychological operations produced widespread paralysis. Power remained out in major cities, banks stayed shuttered, and government offices struggled to function without digital infrastructure. The hijacked television broadcast circulated quickly, fueling rumors of unrest and deepening the sense of crisis in urban centers. Tehran's streets, usually crowded, fell silent except for isolated gatherings marked by uncertainty and fear. The regime's ability to project stability had been shattered. The perception of control was replaced by visible disorder and doubt. The leadership in Tehran faced a situation for which there was no immediate remedy. Operation Rising Lion had not only destroyed physical assets, but had also struck at the heart of the regime's legitimacy. With military defenses compromised, critical infrastructure disabled, and the population exposed to images of dissent, Iran's rulers confronted a crisis that extended far beyond the loss of nuclear capability. Israel's offensive demonstrated the effectiveness of integrated warfare. Success measured not just in destroyed targets, but in the erosion of a nation's confidence and the disruption of its command structure. As the last echoes of the offensive faded, Iran's cities remained crippled and its leadership isolated. The population, cut off from reliable news and basic services, faced a new and uncertain reality. Iran's collapse began not with a single explosion, but with the sudden disappearance of the systems that made daily life possible. The coordinated strikes plunged major cities into darkness. Power grids failed, hospitals lost electricity, and digital banking stopped overnight. ATMs and payment networks shut down, freezing access to cash and halting all transactions. For patients in intensive care, the blackout carried life or death consequences. Without backup generators or stable power, hospital staff struggled to keep critical equipment running. Emergency services, already stretched thin, faltered as communications and logistics unraveled. The fabric of daily life, work, school, commerce, simply ceased, replaced by uncertainty and fear. Amid this paralysis, government officials scrambled to restore order, but the loss of digital infrastructure left them with few options. The internet, once a tool for coordination and command, went silent in key regions. Communities became isolated, unable to communicate with each other or with authorities. The breakdown was not just physical, but psychological. The absence of information bred suspicion and anxiety. Families, friends, and entire neighborhoods waited for news that never came, each hour deepening the sense of abandonment. As the civilian crisis unfolded, Iran's leadership attempted to demonstrate strength with a swift retaliation. Shahab-3 ballistic missiles and waves of drones were launched toward Israeli and US targets. Yet the response was almost immediately rendered ineffective. Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow 3 formed an impenetrable shield, intercepting nearly every missile and drone before they reached their targets. The brief flashes of incoming fire were met with coordinated countermeasures, leaving little doubt about the technological superiority of the defenders. Iran's much-anticipated counterstrike failed to inflict meaningful damage, its impact reduced to a series of intercepted threats and distant explosions. The consequences of this failed retaliation were immediate and severe. Israeli and US drones quickly tracked the origin of the missile and drone launches, striking mobile launchers within hours. The destruction of these sites eliminated the possibility of a sustained response, further eroding the regime's credibility. Each attempted launch was met with swift and decisive retaliation, underscoring the vulnerability of Iran's military infrastructure. What was intended as a show of force instead became a demonstration of impotence, both to Iran's adversaries and to its own population. The psychological toll on Tehran's residents was stark. Drone footage and local cameras captured empty highways, shuttered shops, and long lines of cars at gas stations as people sought to flee the capital. The usual hum of city life was replaced by silence and the distant sound of emergency sirens. The fear of invasion or internal rebellion became palpable, amplified by the absence of reliable news and the visible failure of the nation's defenses. In neighborhoods across Tehran, rumors spread unchecked, filling the void left by state media's silence. Some believed foreign troops might soon enter the city. Others suspected an uprising was already underway. In this environment, the regime's loss of narrative control became as damaging as the physical destruction. With communication networks down, state media struggled to project authority or reassure the public. The vacuum was filled with speculation and dread. Those able to leave the city faced gridlocked roads and fuel shortages, while those who remained withdrew indoors, wary of what might come next. The sense of abandonment deepened. Survival became a matter of waiting and watching rather than acting. Meanwhile, US and Israeli military assets maintained a visible presence in the region. Carrier strike groups remained on alert in the Persian Gulf, and additional bombers and surveillance aircraft moved closer to Iranian airspace. E-4B. Doomsday planes circled overhead, prepared to coordinate further operations if escalation occurred. The message was unmistakable. The initial strikes were only the opening phase, and the threat of further action loomed over the regime's every move. Iran's attempt to retaliate had failed to shift the balance. Its arsenal had been exposed as vulnerable, its infrastructure crippled, and its population left in a state of fear and uncertainty. The regime's image of strength was shattered, replaced by doubt on every front. And yet, Tehran's silence spoke louder than any missile roar. What would come next in the deadened streets? In this aftermath, the coordinated US-Israeli operation stands as a defining moment. Together, these twin strikes shattered Iran's nuclear shield and paralyzed its state from Tehran's avenues to its underground bunkers. Military assets were destroyed, infrastructure failed, and public trust fractured under the strain of blackout and chaos. With US forces still on high alert in the region, the strategic situation remains fluid and unresolved. The world now faces a pivotal question. Will this force Iran back to the negotiating table, or is the region on the brink of full-scale war? If you found this breakdown illuminating, hit like and subscribe for more deep dives into critical military operations.